So in 2022, we decided when things started opening up in April that this is the year that we're going to do all these different kinds of events, see which events work for us and see which ones don't. And because I write fantasy, there are events that are geared towards fantasy writers. There are Reading Fests, there's medieval fairs, and those are amazing places for unknown authors to make a living. And when people come and see my books, they think I'm a bookseller. I've got 14 books on stands. They go, oh, who's that bookseller? And when you go into a bookstore or wherever, you naturally look for your favorite authors. You look for Stephen King or Margaret Atwood or whoever you like. And as soon as you don't see them, you move on. So people see Richard H. Stevens. They don't know who that schmuck is. So they start to walk away, and I stop them. I say, I'm the author. And as soon as I say I'm the author, all of a sudden they're intrigued and they stop and they will come talk to me. They're actually talking to an author.
Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectives, and welcome to episode 296 of the Stark Reflections podcast. This is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. In today's episode, I have an interview with Richard H. Stevens. Richard began writing circa 1974 as a bored child looking for something to do. A trip to the local bookstore saw the proprietor introduce him to the works of Terry Brooks and Stephen R. Donaldson, and his writing life was forever changed. Richard worked in a warehouse for 22 years before going back to school, graduating with honors, and joining the local police service. In 2017, 35 years after that first major spark of inspiration from an Iron Maiden song, Richard resigned from the police service to pursue writing full-time. With the support of his family, he has finally realized his boyhood dream. We talk about that and about the unique way that Richard is selling and marketing his print books. And that's coming up later in this episode. But first, let's hear a word about this episode's sponsor. This episode is sponsored by Findaway Voices. Findaway Voices is an audiobook platform that allows you to get your audiobooks out into the world, and they've just announced a new market. Well, it's not a new market, but it's a new territory for the market. So Spotify, which is available pretty much around the world, only has audiobooks in particular markets. And now, Canadians like me can now listen to audiobooks on Spotify. Spotify's audiobooks are finally launching in Canada after being available in the United States, the United Kingdom, Ireland, Australia, and New Zealand for roughly 5 months. See, I knew they would get to it because they always get to Canada, right? We're maybe not one of the first ones, but we're there. Now, the feature, first released in the US back in September 2022, expanded into other countries mentioned above in November, and now the spring of 2023, they're in Canada. The addition of Canada to the list supported of countries means Canadians will be able to purchase and listen to a catalog of more than 300,000 audiobook titles. The experience will be available in English and French Canadian. This is something Spotify told Mobile Syrup in an email statement. I'm reading that from the Mobile Syrup site. But what I love about this is you can market your books on Spotify through Findaway Voices. You get 100 download codes. I was recently interviewed for the Writers of the Future podcast, and I put aside a batch of those codes for listeners to that podcast. Now, the cool thing about that is people who listen to podcasts are more likely to want to listen to audiobooks. So, when I was talking to John and being interviewed, and that's probably going to be coming out a few weeks from now, during the episode, John's going to mention, hey, if you want to get access to list of we were talking about my Canadian Werewolf series. I've got a batch of audiobooks just rocking and ready and raring to go for people who want to listen to them on Spotify. And now Canadians have access to the audiobooks on Spotify. So exciting. That's just one of the many great marketing opportunities you get with Findaway Voices. And if you want to check out how you can leverage Findaway Voices for your audiobooks, you can check them out over at starkreflections.ca/Findaway. It's just going to be a brief personal update this week, as I am behind the 8 ball, as I often am in a busy week. I had the March 21st new releases for less deal from BookBub. It hasn't gone as great as I'd hoped, but added on a few other marketing promotions, BookBub ads, as well as one of the ads through Written Word Media, which just kicked in today. And we'll see how all of that shakes out. It's not as large as I was hoping it to be, but it's moving some more copies. And I've also seen some additional sales of people obviously going through and buying the previous 5 books in the series. And you gotta love that. So no, it's not the windfall of a BookBub feature deal, but every little bit helps. So one of the writing projects I'm working on now is I'm just finalizing a French translation. A friend of mine, Nicolette Jones, who did the original artwork that I used in Snowman Shivers, which are my family-friendly dark humor snowman tales, mini digital chapbook, basically 12,000 words. And she also is completely bilingual. So I had Nicolette translate that into Francais, into French. And a friend of mine, who is also a bilingual reader, was the proofreader of that. And so Miranda had gone through that. Just looking for little tweaks and edits, etc. And so that is something that is coming out. It's got a new cover with art by Nicolette, and that's going to be published in French. I'm using Draft to Digital's payment splitting for that, so we are splitting that 50-50, and we're going to make that available in ebook, also in print book form. I am going to bypass the comments, but I do want to say I'm so excited, so thrilled with all of the comments I'm getting from you awesome listeners for the 300th episode, which is just coming in just 4 weeks. So if you haven't had a chance, there'll be a link in the show notes at starkreflections.ca where you can share your reflections for special episode 300. But that is it for the introductory matter for this podcast. I am eager and excited to get to this interview with Richard H. Stevens. Hey, Richard, welcome to the Stark Reflections podcast.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's so fun. I realized that all the years that we've known each other, that even though, and I've interviewed you for Draft to Digital,
That's right.
Never had you on my podcast. So
no, I've been looking forward to it. This is like one of those ticks on the bucket list to try and get off as a writer.
So we know each other from a local writers group, but my listeners may not be as familiar with you. Can you give us a bit of a background about who is Richard H. Stevens?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm an epic fantasy author from Canada. I write in what I call the Soulforge universe, which is my universe. It's an epic fantasy universe in my world. I have 14 books out now. I'm presently working on book 15. I hope to have it released at some point this year, and I want to get it released sooner than later so I can take advantage of the book markets that I go to throughout the summer and fall and into the Christmas season. So hopefully I get it done by June or July and take advantage of the sales of the new book.
So 14 books, 15 books, like the 15th is on its way, and they're all in the same universe. Are they all part of the same series, or are they connected series?
So if anyone's familiar with Terry Brooks, I write mine in trilogies, and every trilogy stands on its own. So there is a chronological order timeline. It's all about the rise and fall of dragons over a couple thousand years. But my last series is actually the first one I wrote. So back in 1982, I had an epiphany that I wanted to write fantasy. I never thought I'd be writing fantasy until the song Run to the Hills by Iron Maiden, it is Iron Maiden, came on the radio late one night on a Toronto rock station called Q107. And for some reason, it put this trilogy in my head. I wasn't planning on writing.
Wait a second. Run to the Hills by Iron Maiden in the 80s.
That's
put the
correct.
trilogy into your head.
It put the beginning of it,
Wow.
and right away I knew the ending. I knew exactly how it was going to end. I just had to write the 1,200 pages in between. And
So
Run for the Hills is not a fantasy song. It's more about North American Aboriginals. So, but I don't know why it sparked
wow.
that story in my head.
I didn't
I
know
was
that.
writing science fiction at the time.
So this is the 80s.
1982, yep.
As I understand it, you didn't start your publishing seriously until 2017. So you were sitting on these ideas for quite a while, right?
Yeah, well, I had 2 careers and 5 children, and of course, they take precedence over anything that I wanted to do. It was more of a hobby for me at the time.
Right.
I wrote a couple of novellas just so I could understand my main characters in my original book a little bit better. So when I was writing it, I knew what made them tick, not necessarily the reader would ever know. But so I used to read them to my children as they were growing up. And
really, so you were reading these fantasy adventures to your children, just as sort of like, hey, you were working on them while you were doing the other full-time work pursuits and family and all that, right?
No, absolutely. And I take my hat off to anyone who can raise a family, work a full-time job outside of writing, and actually publish a book, because I could not do that. I actually had to leave my full-time job in April of 2017 in order to realize my lifelong dream of becoming an author.
Okay, so 84, roughly mid 80s, early 80s.
82, yep.
82, you had this vision that you wanted to write. You even started to conceptualize the George Lucas sort of vision of the universe you were going to create. The Soul Forge, the Star Trek, Star Wars universe. Oh my God, I just made science fiction people like freak out because I accidentally said Trek instead of Wars. I'm like, no, they're different. I know, I get it, I understand.
I love them all. So
yeah, I know, I love them all too. But not as passionately as some people who freak out that I said Trek instead of Wars. One's science fiction, the other one's science fantasy.
That's right. And if you know the people that it bothers, you like to throw them out every now and then just to get them going in, and you walk away. Yeah.
But back then, so you had this vision, right? So you had these stories, you knew how it was going to end, and you even shared novella-length tales from this universe that you had imagined with your kids. But so 1982 to 2017. Now I have to take my shoes and socks off to do the math there, but that's more than just a couple of years, right?
That's 35 years, yeah.
35 years. So the difference, because I was starting and writing around the same time you were starting and writing, the difference in terms of what you would have done or had to do in 1982 compared to when you came into your own in 2017. Can you share a little bit about what that was like?
In 1982, like I say, I was never planning on writing the Soul Forge universe. The original book is called The River Styx. I love the name Styx for river, S-T-Y-X. And I knew that my hero had to go to this mystic river to enchant his sword, to put the power back in his blade so he could deal with the sorcerer who was taking over the land. And for probably about 33 years, that book was always called The River Styx. And when I finally finished it and started trying to play around with the editing of it, I started going online, and I started building myself a social media presence. And one of the first author groups, I don't even think I'm in it anymore, but I was speaking to one of the ladies there, and she said, "Oh, I love Greek mythology." And right away, it has no Greek mythology in it whatsoever. And I realized that I had to stop and get rid of that name that I had in my head for 33 years. Right. And so the book actually went through about 3 or 4 different name changes before it finally became Soul Forge. And yeah, it's funny how these things go.
Which was perfect, actually, because that became the name of the universe.
It did. And even at that point, 33 years later, I never thought I'd have a universe. I just thought I wanted to write the 3 books. I just had to get books 2 and 3 written. Wow. And I didn't know what I wanted to do with book 1. So I went down to Nashville in 2017, and I pitched an agent, and we went through that process, and that was a long, frustrating process. At least my experience with an agent wasn't a favorable one that I don't envy anyone else having to put up with. I found the agents that I work with were very non-responsive. So, they wanted my first 50 pages. And then if they don't hear from them in 3 months, then consider that my stuff isn't for them. But after about 4 months, I wanted to just make sure, because I'm new to the business, right. Was it for them? And I sent them a simple email, and they wouldn't respond to me. So around Christmas time of 2017, I realized I'm probably gonna have to do this myself. I didn't adamantly go after other agents, but so I found myself a professional editor in Glasgow, Scotland, and she started whipping that book into shape. But in the interim, after I found her, the agent finally got back to me and said, "Yep, send me the rest of the book."
Okay.
And again, we went through that same process. After 3 months, you don't hear from me, consider it's not for us. 4 months went by. I figured I'd just send them a quick email just so I knew, do I keep self-publishing, or do I start the self-publishing route, or do I hang in with the agent? And they wouldn't respond to me. So I finally just said, the heck with it. I'm going to do it myself. And I did. And then 2018, August, Soul Forge was born.
Wow. And so since August 2018, and this is being recorded in early 2023, very early 2023, basically 14 books already out and the 15th one on the way. Now, you retired, right?
That's right. I don't know if I retired. I just resigned. I used to work at the Waterloo Regional Police Service, and I'm not a big dude. I'm not an alpha male either. I enjoyed some of the aspects of the job I did. I certainly enjoyed marching in uniform for our fallen officers and doing memorials and stuff like that. But dealing with the people that I had to deal with in the court systems every day took a great toll on me, my mental health, and it got to the point that I couldn't function doing anything else. I couldn't write. I couldn't do anything else. I'd come home and all I'd think about, because I knew what the roster was going to be like tomorrow. Who are the people are coming in from the penitentiaries?
Right.
And I know what they're like. And I just constantly thinking, oh God, I got to deal with these guys again. And it's not a fun job, especially if you're not an alpha male, which I'm not. So 12 years went by, and my wife realized that if she didn't get me out of there, it might end my life prematurely. So we decided at the end of April in 2017 to retire from, or resign, I guess, from all the regional police service. She was doing very well with an online job that she did, so she started supporting both of us.
Wow. It's amazing because you think about the people who have a job and they work and then they come home and then they write, and the writing is their passion. But this sounds like this job was emotionally destructive and draining, so that you didn't have anything left, right, for writing.
Well, it certainly was. And actually, to say that the only time I did write was actually when I was on the job, because we had a 1 hour unpaid lunch. So for me to distance myself from what I had to deal with in the afternoon or the evening, depending on what shift I was on, I would go in, throw my stuff in the microwave, talk to people in the lunchroom for about 5 minutes until my stuff was ready. And then I'll start eating. I put my headphones on. I had my laptop there, and I would edit the stuff that I'd written. I couldn't write anymore, but I could edit I'd written the 2 novellas, and Soul Forge was pretty well done at that point as well. So there was a lot of editing to do. And so I just sit down there for an hour and I'd edit, and it just helped me distance myself from the real world.
Wow. Now, speaking of the real world, one of the things I think is unique about your marketing and your author branding and all of those things, because I think you have you play a really solid game there. A lot of us can learn from, is you do a lot of real world stuff, whereas a lot of indie authors lean heavily on ebooks and lean heavily on digital sales, meaning, yay, I can sit behind a keyboard and ha 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 ha. Someone I never have to look at or talk to buys my books. But you are a veritable powerhouse. I mean, your family is technically, because I see you guys in full force out there, often together as a team. But can you talk a little bit about the strategies you've employed in the real world with physical books? Because I think we have a lot to learn by paying attention to what you're doing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I got to give a shout out to my wife. She's the driving force behind the scenes. She doesn't get any credit whatsoever. She's so I always consider myself, I tell people this, that I'm the race car driver. I drive the car. I get all the glory. Oh, he's the author. I cross the finish line. I get all the accolades. But without my pit crew behind me, my car doesn't move. So without my support staff behind me, my editors, my cover designers, my wife, obviously. So all the credit to them. I don't do this on my own. As far as the book events go, I cannot figure out Amazon or Facebook marketing. So that is one of the driving forces to me going out to the real world and actually peddling my books, because I don't sell a lot online. And I'm this unknown author. People aren't going on to Amazon looking for Richard H. Stevens. They don't know who he is. So I'm trying to figure out the Amazon marketing. There are many months I spend more on advertising than I do making sales. So I decided I still want to make money with these things. And I met an author from Sudbury. He's a science fiction author named David Kelly, and Sudbury is close to you, I know, as far as close to your heart. But so I went up to the Graphicon in Sudbury in 2019, I guess, and I just had the 2 novellas out at the time and the 1 book. And I didn't sell a lot of books, but I enjoyed doing it, and I learned a lot from David. He'd done a few before me, and since then, 2019, we did a couple more events. I did Word on the Street in Toronto, and 2020 was supposed to be our breakthrough year. So we started talking to the IRS. We were going to tour the States. Of course, COVID stopped all that from happening. So in 2022, we decided when things started opening up in April that this is the year that we're going to do all these different kinds of events, see which events work for us and see which ones don't. And because I write fantasy, there are events that are geared towards fantasy writers. There are Ren Fests, there's medieval fairs, and those are amazing places for unknown authors to make a living. And it's not because I'm an author, but when people come and see my books, they think I'm a bookseller. I've got 14 books on stands. They go, oh, who's that bookseller? And when you go into a bookstore or wherever, you naturally look for your favorite authors. You look for Mark Leslie Lefebvre, right? You're looking for Stephen King or Margaret Atwood or whoever you like. And as soon as you don't see them, you move on. So people see Richard H. Stevens, they don't know who that schmuck is. So they start to walk away, and I stop them. I say, I'm the author. And as soon as I say I'm the author, all of a sudden they're intrigued and they stop and they'll come talk to me. They're actually talking to an author. Right. And once they realize they're actually my books, now they're interested. And then they realize that I'm from Ontario. I do all my book events have been in Ontario. So now they like to support local. So I do quite well. And since I have 14 titles out, I can offer deals on trilogies and stuff like that, which also entices people to buy more books.
Wow, I love that, because you're actually leveraging the unique factor, because anyone can walk by a stand of books because some booksellers selling a bunch of books, but you're the guy who made the books. You're the creator as well. But you also do some branding stuff, some very because it's not necessarily Richard standing in jeans and a t-shirt. Sometimes I see Richard standing in some sort of other outfits, right?
That's right. And so depending on what I'm doing, Comic-Cons, I do it as well. Ren Fests, medieval fairs, I will wear a knight's costume. And it's just a very cheap knight's costume. People think it's really cool. I must have spent a lot of money on it. I found it on Amazon, or my wife found it on Amazon. We bought it, brought it. It looks like chainmail. It's not. It's a lot more comfortable than chainmail, a lot lighter. Right. But it attracts the attention of people. And they walk by and they, what the heck's going on over there? Then they come over. And I also offer little baubles, so little dragon jewelry, and it's just cheap cosmetic jewelry. And I tell them right up front that it's not something you'd buy your wife as a anniversary present. This is just some kind of fun costume jewelry, but it brings people to my booth. And at that point I can say, and I also write these books. And again, there's the hook. So I think the biggest thing, if anyone's ever doing these events, don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Let them know that you are the author. You'll get the odd person that go, oh yeah, he publishes his own books, and they'll walk away, and that's fine. Those aren't the people you're going to sell your books to anyway. Let them go. But most people will say, oh, you're the author, and they get so interested and they want to talk to you. And through the course of conversation, you'll end up selling books. Not always, but I do okay.
And because you have multiple books, like you said, you have like a price. So let's say we'll narrow it down to a trilogy. There's a price per book, but then you also have if you buy all 3, you get some sort of deal.
That's correct. So my books were originally $15, and so I would sell, if you bought them individually, it was $45. But if you bought 3, I'd take $5 off, and you got $40. And people would say, "Oh, that's pretty good. I have saved $5." The price of paper started going up. So in September of 2022, I finally decided I got to up my prices. Right. So I jumped them up to $20, and now so that's $60, and $50 to $60. It's a big jump. Right. But so now I tell them it's $20 a book, 3 books for $60. But if you buy them all, I take $10 off book 3. Right. So now they're not saving $5. they're actually saving $10.
Right.
And I think that really resonates with them too. Like, wow, I'm going to save $10 if I buy all three.
Yeah.
And I'm actually making more money than I did before because I'm making $50 on the trilogy as opposed to 40. There is a bit of inflation with the paper cost, but I'm still doing better than that. So I think that people will perceive it as a deal. And the problem with, if you're an author they don't know, they might buy one book to take a chance on you.
Right. Yeah.
But if I give them the deal, they say, well, all right, I might as well buy all
here.
three and get the trilogy. I'm going to be getting book one. So I'll make a lot of sales that way. And that way I can really make a lot of money pretty fairly quickly.
So I just want to reiterate a couple things. The first is that you're not selling novellas, you're selling doorstopper kind of thick epic fantasy books, right?
Yeah, there's one here. It's and they're 6x9.
Yeah.
So I've thought about making them into 4x6s because I love paperbacks. And Amazon won't actually print them that big because once you make them smaller, all of a sudden
too many pages. Yeah. Well, I mean, these are what, 300, 400 page tomes.
That
right?
that one's almost 700 pages. That's 673 pages. Yeah.
No, that you're talking about the omnibus or the whatever. Is it the one you just held up? Is that 700?
Yeah. No, that's a single book. It's becoming Brandon Sanderson-ish. It's 673 pages. It's
okay. So 20 and you're not talking $20 American, you're talking $20 Canadian, right?
This one's 25 now. It finally went up to 25, yes.
Because I was going to say that's like the cost of printing that is pretty outrageous. So, but it's 20 Canadian you're talking about when you talk, or 25 for something.
That's great. It's Canadian, yeah. But I found myself a local printer in Toronto, and as opposed to ordering off Amazon, it's a lot cheaper than getting author copies off a place like Amazon.
So how does that work? Do you have to order a minimum of 100 or something to get a price comparable? I know you're saving a lot on shipping, but how does that work?
Yeah, as long as you buy 50 copies or more, then they waive the setup fee of $50. So I originally, there's a couple times I had ordered 35 books, and they said, okay, well, it's going to be $50 setup fee. And I figured, well, you know what, for $50, I might as well just order the extra 15 books.
Right.
And I'll save myself the $50, and then I've got the books on hand. So working with this local printer certainly saved me a lot of money. I probably, this book, I remember I needed quick copies for an event I did because I was running out. And I ordered author copies on Amazon, and it cost me about $19.50 for a $20 book. Wow. I'm not making too much money, but I want to have them on hand just so I can sell the other ones with it.
Yeah.
And but I can get them for almost, I wouldn't say half, but I can get them for a lot less than that through the place in Scarborough.
You're talking about the cost of the printing plus shipping it and all that stuff, right?
That's right. A lot of times I'll just drive up. The guy's so awesome to work with. He'll actually have someone on a shipping dock at 6:30 in the morning, so I can miss the Toronto traffic. If anyone's familiar with Toronto, even though it takes about 40 minutes to get to Toronto, if the traffic's there, it's going to take you an hour and a half, a minimum, and the frustration and everything else. So he's been so great to work with. There are more local printers around here, and I actually found one that offered about, I don't know, 5 cents less a copy. But like this printer, he will do it like within a couple of weeks. His turnaround time is very quick, and he's been so good to me. So there's something to be said about customer service.
Yeah, that is true. And loyalty in customers, because you've worked with him, you trust each other. Is he willing to take on new clients? So if any,
absolutely,
locals are interested, what's the name of the printer? And
it's Printing Legacy. He's on 1305 Morningside Drive in Scarborough. Printing Legacy. His name is John Gunnasacker, I believe is how you say his last name. Like I say, he's just a small mom and pop place, and he's just amazing to deal with. I send him PDF files, and sometimes, when you set up the book, you always want your book to start on the right page, like the right-hand side when you first start your story. And the odd time the PDF just isn't working out, and he will send me the proof copies, and instead of me having to manipulate the PDF, he just does it for me. Wow. He doesn't charge anything. He'll manipulate it so that it starts in the right spot.
Well, because you're a longtime customer who's done a lot of work with them. And I'm assuming you'll send me the link I can include in the show notes for people that.
Oh, absolutely. Sure. I will.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I love that. I love that choice, that option. And also, you're a small independent business, and you're supporting another small independent business, and that's really cool. So the other thing is in the greater Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge area, maybe every once in a while driving around, and you may see this vehicle with a beautiful branded trailer. Can you talk, like, when you decided that you were going to go all in on doing these in-person events, you didn't just go, okay, I got some books and a tablecloth. I'm gonna go and slap some books down and pay $50 for a table or whatever the price is, and see if I can hawk some books. You got really serious about the branding. Can you talk a little bit about the trailer, the methodology behind that, and even like the show you put on too?
Yeah, the trailer was kind of come out of nowhere. I had a open trailer that I used to haul my garden tractor around in, and then our daughter, she has special needs, and she wanted to write books too because she saw that we did it, and we said, okay, we write the story, we will edit it. My wife does the graphics for it. We know how to publish them now, so we'll look after that. But we sometimes do events together, and when we do events together with her in the back seat, now it's taken away a lot of space because we got to carry tables and chairs and all that other stuff. With 14 books, I got to carry a lot of boxes, so we decided that we need to get a trailer to haul our books, and we need the cover trailer because it's a book. So paper doesn't like rain, it doesn't like snow, so it had to be covered. So then we went out to buy this cover trailer. We're going to get a smaller one. We found a good deal on the 14-foot one, and then we bought that. And then my wife said, you know what, we're dragging that around. And again, it's my wife driving these things. She's the brains behind all the branding. I mean, it's not me. I just write the story. So I'm the race car driver. My picker is doing all my work for me. And she said, you know, we might as well advertise on it. So then we thought, how we're going to do that. And she said, well, why don't we put the book covers on it? So we actually, the nose, it's one of those, it's not a round trailer. It's got a triangle nose to it. And she said, that would look awesome, like a book laying on its face on a table. So we have Rika's Flight. We have the front cover on the one side, and then the spine is right in the middle. And then we have the back of the book on the other side. And it looks really neat going down. And people actually see me now. They will drive by and they will recognize the trailer and go, oh, he's there. And then they will stop.
It's in the parking lot at an event, cool. Right?
Yes.
I love that.
So the branding, they like you say, it's so crucial that people start to recognize me. I used to sell them at the St. Jacobs Flea Market during COVID because there was nothing going on, and people recognize my banners now, and they'll see them on other places. Oh yeah, I remember you. And so it doesn't happen enough yet, but it's happening that enough that make it. It's a neat feeling as an author to know that people actually have read your stuff and then actually want to read more of your stuff. I think that's the biggest compliment you can get.
So when you do these events, you're not just kind of sitting in a chair in the back of the booth, hoping nobody talks to you, hiding behind a book over your face. What are some sort of techniques or things that you would advise authors want to consider doing if they're doing an in-person event like that?
Just smile. You start learning how to read the crowd. There are some people that you don't interact with. They have sour faces or whatever. But and sometimes that's wrong, because sometimes if you do interact with them, all of a sudden someone wants to talk to me, and they're not sour at all. They're that's just the way they carry themselves. I know a lot of times I look grumpy sometimes, and I don't mean to. My face is just built that way. But so just engage them. Don't be afraid to engage them. And if they don't want to talk to you, then bye-bye. Own it, own yourself, own the fact that you are the author, and don't be afraid to tell them. I think that's my biggest piece of advice when you're doing a book event, is let them know up front you are the author, because people will think you're a bookseller. I don't know how many, we went on Vistaprint, which is a place that makes signs. And when I was at the St. Jacobs Market, so it says, I am the author, meet the author. I've got a sign with my picture on it that says I'm the author. And even though these are readers, which is kind of ironic, they don't read the signs. They will not know that you are the author. They come in there and they're looking for J.K. Rowling. They see dragons. They're looking for George R. R. Martin, and they don't see George R. R. Martin, and they start to walk away and say, hey, these are all my books. If you're looking for someone else, you will not find them, because they're all mine. And some people will still walk away because they're only looking for someone else, but it will intrigue a lot of people, but they actually get to speak to the author. And I think that's the most important thing about doing book events, is letting people know you're not a bookseller, but you are, but you're also the author.
I love that. And it's a subtle reminder, because you think it's obvious. Yes. It's on the signs. Your name is on, the same name is on every book.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And yet you're like, no, I'm just here selling Richard's books.
That's right. Yeah.
So I love that. What are some of the mistakes you may have made over the years in terms of that in-person selling experience?
I know a lot of, and this is just purely from my point of view. I've been with other authors, and they do things differently, and it works for them. And that's the one thing too, is you need to do these events yourself to find out what will actually work for you. So what works for Richard E. Stevens might not necessarily work for Mark Leslie Lefebvre, but I will see what Mark is doing, and I know, oh, that's a neat idea, and I will try it, and it might work for me, it might not. But if it doesn't, that's fine. You can either modify it to make it work for you, or you can just say, okay, that's not working for me, and move on. People offer things like candies, and they have giveaways, and they do all these things. And I was at a Brantford writers meeting last month. I was invited to talk, and I said one thing about giveaways. I said, don't do them. For me, it does not work. There's so many costs involved in being an independent author. You got your cover designers, you get a professional cover. That's the big thing that draws people in. If you don't have a professional cover, if you don't know who I am, but you love my cover, you're going to come see me.
Right.
And then get yourself a professional editor, because if you read my first book and it's edited very poorly, it doesn't matter how great the story is, you'll never read me again. So right. Your cover will sell your first book, your editor will sell your rest of your books. But I don't do giveaways, because you have the editor, you have the cover designers, you got the print, which isn't cheap. You have to pay for the events. You have to pay for the fuel to get to the events. You have to pay for the food while you're at the events. There's just all these costs in behind that it takes a lot. So if I sell $100 worth of books, I'm not making $100 profit.
Right.
One, I have to cover my event fees. And then at that point, anything after that, half of that is going to my print costs. So in order for me to make any money, I've got to sell well beyond the cost of the event. So doing giveaways for me just seemed it's silly. But that being said, if I have someone who comes back to me and says, oh, I saw you at the Eden Mills Writers Festival, I bought Rika's Flight, I really loved it, I want to get book 2 and 3. At that point, I've got these little pictures that I sign. And I tell them I'm not the artist, but they're interior pictures that I have in my books. And they have little notes on the back of the pictures, and I sign them and I give them to them as a thank you for coming back. And I think that goes a long way to just cementing that relationship with that fan. So I think once you can hook that fan, you're going to have them for life. Like
right.
50% of people that buy my books will probably never buy my book again, because I'm not for them. Yeah. Just like not everyone likes Stephen King, but hopefully 50% of people that buy my books will want books 2 and books 3 and so forth.
I like the differentiation. You don't just have a bowl of candy or some sort of treats that draws any schlep to the booth. What you have is some free stuff that's very specifically targeted to the right people as a special treat for them, because they came back, or because you're like, hey, I came here to get book 2. I remember talking to you. I'm back. And so now you have a relationship.
Exactly.
Right. The difference between selling a book and having a long-term reader, I think.
For sure. No, I build up a good rapport. And then the neat thing I do too, and I guess you can do this as any genre, because you can have people name characters, is I came up with the idea just to say thank you to. I had this right from day one, right from September 2017, when I sold my first novella on Amazon. I only did put that on Amazon. It's not professionally edited. I put it on Amazon so I could cut my teeth on Amazon. I didn't really care if I sold it. I wanted to get ready for Soulforge when it came out in 2018. So I actually published 2 novellas in 2017, just so I learned how to do Amazon.
Right.
Amazon's the big market. And this lady from, she's got a sad story. She lives in Kansas City. She doesn't have a great life. She has no means. She's bought every single one of my books. She's always supporting me. She asked me to give her business cards so she can hand them out to people at the Kansas City airport when she's doing her job as a janitor. Wow. She says, oh, do you like books? She'll see someone reading, she'll hand them my business card. Wow. So it was her birthday in 2019, and I was writing Rika's Flight. And I said, as she was having a bad day, I was talking to her online, and I was worried about her. I said, how would you like to name a dragon in my books? And that just made her day. And I had the idea, that's a cool idea to give back to my readers. So I give my readers the opportunity to name characters in my books. And if you get your name mentioned in the book, I will say thank you to Mark Leslie Lefebvre for naming such and such a dragon. And then you can follow your dragon around. And it's not always a dragon. Sometimes I'll take the name and use it for a dwarf, because I think it's more dwarven than dragonish. But it's kind of a fun way to give back to my readers. And I think that way I'm building up a rapport with them as well.
Wow, I love that. It really engages them and involves them, and they get to be part of the process, which is fantastic. So you talked about doing a whole bunch of events in 2022, and then deciding which ones were good and which ones were bad. Now, you talked a little bit about the economics
Yep.
Is it just the economics, or are there other factors involved? How do you decide, like, okay, so you've done 2022. I imagine obviously you and your team have a plan now for 2023 and going forward. How did you decide? You look at that 2022, you go, okay, this one, yeah, we'll do this one again. This one, this one, maybe we'll see. Like, what are some of those factors that you consider?
Yeah, the biggest driving force obviously is sales. So if I'm spending, I don't know, $200, let's say, so that's a booth, the cost of gas, and maybe a meal for me and my wife if she's there. So that means in order to get that $200 back, I have to sell $400 worth of books. And that's not easy, and it's a lot easier for someone with more books. So if you've only got one or two books out, I would suggest maybe looking at smaller events that you don't have to pay as much for your tables up front. A lot of times ask them if they'll accept you as a guest author. You don't even have to pay to be there. I've had that happen a few times in these smaller Comic-Cons because you're offering something different. But as far as the events, obviously it's the economics. And we did a one up in Hastings, which is on the other side of Peterborough. It's quite a drive for us. It's almost 3 hours by the time you pull the trailer up there. We made some money. We covered our costs, but we had a bed and breakfast because we're up there for the weekend. We're up there for the Labor Day weekend, 3 days. But they gave us such an amazing place. It was out in the country. They gave us so much spot. We actually used our trailer as the backdrop of our tents.
Oh, wow.
It was just such a fun event, and the people are all dressed up in knights costumes and stuff like that. And we enjoyed the event so much that even though we're not going to be able to buy a boat next year because of this event, we enjoyed it so much that we asked them if we could come up again. And as long as we're covering our costs, we're now getting a vacation for free, and we're meeting new people. So generally, when we do events in Southern Ontario, we're looking to make money. Obviously, that's why we're doing this. But right. I think even the bigger plan is to get books into people's hands, and hopefully that'll pay it forward in the long run. Right. So if I sell 100 Rika's flights, hopefully 50 people will be looking for Rika's gift, and hopefully 80% of those 50 people will be looking for Rika's legacy and so forth. So it's not always about the money, but certainly you have to make some kind of money. Otherwise, at some point, it's a losing prospect, and all of a sudden, my trailer has to be sold and everything else. So.
And I think the other thing that we can't measure, and this is so difficult, especially for indie authors who are all about the CPC clicks and all that, CPM clicks and all that stuff, is every single book that you sell to a person, you not only have a physical object that is a walking advertisement or billboard for you and your brand, but you've also given this very additional layer that doesn't come with a lot of marketing, an experience. I met the author. He dressed like a knight, and I saw him at this fair, and his wife was there too, and we had a great chat. Oh my God. And his daughter writes kids' books too. Like this is like this amazing sort of experience. So it's not just a flat thumbnail on Amazon. It's this multi-dimensional thing, and that's something that's difficult to measure, I think, in the long run, right?
Oh, absolutely. And if you read my reviews, you'll see that, well, I wouldn't say half, but a lot of my reviews say that they've actually met me in person. We had exactly what you're talking about, and we built up a bit of a rapport. And I think that went a long way towards them buying the books. And maybe they're not as good as J.R. Tolkien, but they really enjoyed being with the author, and they liked the story enough, and they liked the relationship that we're forming, that they're willing to buy more books. And I even sell them out of my house. I've got this great big library in my home, and I say to them, they ask me, where can you buy your books? Because a lot of people are not from where I live. And I say, yeah, they're on Amazon. They're not cheaper, and they're not signed. I said, but if you buy them there, I will sign them if you ever see me. But if you want to, a lot of people, when I have a new release, people drive from all over Southern Ontario to buy the books right out of my house. And I have this great big library, and I invite them in, and they love seeing my library. And I actually built a secret room in the library, so now they can see my secret room. I keep my old manuscripts in there. So I love it. It's a lot of fun. It's all about word of mouth. And that you're right, that is the best advertising for an indie author, at least for me, is having you tell your friend, if you like fantasy, you should meet Richard, or try one of Richard's books. I read one of his books and I really liked it. And because there's no other way they're ever going to find me. Amazon advertising is just such a money pit, I find. I'm not a marketing guru, so I haven't figured out the secret to doing Amazon advertising.
I love that you say that you're not a marketing guru, because every time we are at an event together, I learn something about marketing and author branding from you. And I do definitely appreciate that. So even though you may not be a digital marketing guru, I think you and Carolyn, and I mean, I think you've got something really solid that we can all learn from. And Richard, I want to thank you for sharing some of these insights with me today. Can you please let my listeners know where they can find out more about you online?
Yeah, absolutely. And just before I do that, I think anyone just get out there and do it. Like when I did my first book event up in Sudbury at the Graphicon, someone asked me, he said, "Oh, what's your book about?" I looked at him with a dumb blank stare. Like, I'm the author. I wrote the book. I should know what the book's about. But I just didn't have my elevator pitch down pat. And I handed him the book. I said, "Here, read the back." But as I've done more and more events, I did 33 events last year. Now it's just like second nature. So I can just rhyme it off. And it's but I'm not a good speaker. Like I can't talk. Like I've seen you talk in person and you're engaging, everything else. I'm not that person, and I'm okay with that. I've got over myself, but I know my books. And so the more events that you do, the better you will become. So that first one, you're going to fumble and you're not going to have a right down pat. The second one, you'll learn a bit, and you just keep doing it. After 33 events, if you haven't got it figured out at that point, then maybe you should do something else. But you can find my books on Amazon. You can also get them. You can find links off my website at richardhstevens.com. Don't forget the H. That's another way to brand me. There's so many Richards out there. So look for richardhstevens.com, fantasy author. And you can email me. I ship them worldwide. I've shipped them to New Zealand, Romania, Germany, everywhere else. But just email me and I will send them out, or you can just buy them straight out of my house here in Cambridge. And my wife, she's always updating my website. So every time I sign up for an event, she doesn't just say where I'm going to be. She gives you the details as well, so that you don't have to go Googling where is Hastings. She has everything there for you. So just check my website out and you can find my books right there.
That's awesome. And I advise any authors listening to this, if you are in the Southern Ontario area, to check to see where Richard's going to be, because going and meeting him in person and watching him in action, taking a look at that is really inspiring. It could probably inspire you. Richard, I was going to ask you advice for beginning writers, but I'm going to ask a different question instead, just sort of as we wrap up. What would you tell Richard back in 1982 who heard that Run to the Hills and had this idea for a story? Would you come back, you suddenly show up in your DeLorean and you say, what advice would you offer this young writer?
Well, I used to think that make time for yourself, and because we squander our time away on doing other things, but that's something you want to do at the time. So I tell a lot of I don't know if I've had a discussion with you, but I always tell people I do not believe in writer's block. So I believe the story will write itself when it's ready. So my story took 35 years to write that first book. Could I have done it sooner? Probably. Would it have been the same story? Probably not. So there are a lot of times that I don't write during the day, and I'll go out for a walk or I'll have a shower or something else, and all of a sudden I have these great ideas come in my head. Had I wrote that scene 2 days before, I would never had that, and the scene wouldn't have been as good as it is. So just don't stress over the story. Let the story tell itself. It'll let it, when it's ready to be written, it'll tell you it's ready to be written, and then just go ahead and write it and enjoy the journey as an author. It's an amazing journey. It's got lots of highs. It's got lots of really deep lows, but it's like a roller coaster. That car is going to come back up to the top again. So just, bear with the troughs and enjoy the peaks, and enjoy the journey of being an author, because so many people say they're going to do it and they don't. And if you've done it, then congratulations to you.
Awesome. Amazing advice to end with. Richard, thanks again so much for hanging out with me today.
No, thank you, Mark. I always enjoy talking to you.
I want to reflect on something Richard spoke about, and that is, so for the in-person signings, and this is something I am not all that good at, is talking to people. I know it sounds weird, because anyone who knows me from my speaking engagements, etc., believe that I'm extroverted. I'm more of an omnivert, and I'm good at selling things I believe in and other people I believe in, but I get really uncomfortable selling my own stuff. And anytime you see me doing shameless self-promotion, I'm so uncomfortable. And so I've gone to so many different events and able to watch Richard in action, either because he's my neighbor, or I across the way or whatever, or even just at the much larger events when you wander around on a break and stuff like that. And I'm just so impressed with how he engages with the readers. And so I want to reflect on something he said. And this goes back to something I did. So I did something similar to him. I have some banners say, live in person today, big picture of me, Mark Leslie, meet the author. Doesn't matter how many of these signs can be all over the place. And again, I put my picture up there, so it's like, hey, that's the author, look. And I've got all the books, and every single book that I have says Mark Leslie in giant letters. So, it's not the Mark Leslie bookstore. This is Mark Leslie himself. And so, despite all of this evidence that I must be the author, I even have a t-shirt I now wear that has Mark Leslie logo, Mark Leslie Thrills and Chills, with my website and a little skull on it. Again, I think I got that for like $35 via Fiverr, so it wasn't a bad deal. No, it wasn't Fiverr. It was another source that did some, customized graphics, etc. I can't even remember where I got it from. But that being said, I've got all of this stuff that really should say I'm the author, but people are overwhelmed. They're looking at all kinds of things and they're not really processing. So people don't really pay attention and process. It's not until you have the break the ice thing. Now, one of the things I use to break the ice is I have skulls and creepy stuff. I even have a sign. It's hanging on the door of my office right now, but I take it and I usually hang it on the booth, and it says "Ghost Stories Told Here," and that's an icebreaker, so people can go, "Oh, tell me a ghost story," right? So it gives them something fun to do. Me having the skeleton there is also a thing that gives them something fun to do. Oh, hey, your buddy looks like you could use a snack, right? And so it just allows somebody something fun and interesting to say. I may have heard it 1,000 times, but I act like it's the very first time I've ever heard it, because it's the very first time they've probably said that. So to them, it's a unique experience, and it's a great icebreaker, and that's one of the things I do. So obviously, Richard, you see him in the night garb and stuff like that. That's kind of a cool thing, so people can comment on that. Wow, you must be hot today, like summer day and stuff like that. So all of these things are tools we can use, especially if we're introverted. But just remembering that despite all of the evidence in front of you, the person standing there looking at your books probably doesn't realize that you're the author. So, comment about the book, or asking them questions or something like that. Just maybe putting a question out there. Richard talked about, I'm the author, and then all of a sudden their eyes lit up like, oh, really? Cool. That's awesome. Think about this. Most people in the world think they have a book in them. Most people go, oh, I'd like to write a book someday. And most people will never write a book. And the idea to the average person, especially a reader, somebody who reads a lot of books, the idea that this is a person who wrote a book, it's a pretty damn cool thing. I still remember the first time I went to see W.O. Mitchell when I was young, Canadian literary writer, at Laurentian University in Sudbury, Ontario. And I just remember being like in awe. Oh my God, that's a real live writer. And I think Nancy Kilpatrick was the first person. I was working at a Kohl's in Ottawa, on Saint Laurent Boulevard, and there was a Smith Books. You work at one of the bookstores, and you on your lunch break you go to the other bookstore on your lunch break because you're a book nerd. And I saw a sign, Nancy Kilpatrick. I'm like, oh my God, she's an awesome horror writer. I'd like to meet her. And so I went and I bought her one of her vampire novels, and I got it signed. The very first signed book I got from an author, and I was just so in awe. And she was so nice and lovely, and we're friends now. But it was just such an amazing experience. I remember meeting Tanya Huff, a Canadian fantasy, a horror author as well, and it was just such a great experience. But when we're in the author community, we're no longer, well, I still nerd out meeting certain authors because you're like, I love your stuff, it's so cool. So I never stop nerding out, but we forget how unique that experience can be for people, especially for readers, to actually meet authors. And so what we're giving them when we do an in-person event like that is we're giving them a very unique experience. And I think Richard, it's funny how he downplays his marketing, but he's downplaying. Here's the thing, and this is what we do with reviews too. We focus on the 1-star reviews. We don't look at people who love our stuff. Richard said multiple times, I'm not really good at digital marketing. What he means is he's not good at Amazon ads and throwing all that money away at something that's not working, but he is excellent. He's a leader. He is phenomenal. And that's him and his wife and the family and the team working together at in-person book marketing. And that in-person marketing is way more valuable. I'm going to go back to a stat I remember hearing, and I think I first heard it from Dean Wesley Smith, is that a physical book is handled on average by 7 different people. And when you think about a Kindle or Kobo or an ebook, it may be handled by 1.5 people, right? Because it's on a Kindle reader, Kobo reader, a Nook, whatever the device is. Nobody sees it usually but the person reading it. And if, like me, I share my Kobo account with Liz, so we have multiple Kobos in the house, so she can just read on a different Kobo device. So that book may be seen by 2 people, but that averages out to maybe 1.25, 1.5 for most people. But a physical book is a walking advertisement for your book, right? Because people see it, people hold it, people touch it, people give it to their friends, loan it to their friends. So it's constant marketing. So the extra work involved in the physical marketing, in the physical selling of the book, is long-term marketing as opposed to the Amazon ad marketing where you go, hey, I have $100. I'm going to just throw it away so I can show my thumbnail of I'm the highest bidder to some people shopping online. Whereas what Richard's doing with his marketing is he's investing the same $100 or more in physical product and getting out there, but the experience is way beyond a thumbnail. The experience is something unique and impactful and powerful. Talked about naming dragons after readers, having conversations with readers who come back every year is like, oh, I saw you last year at the same event. I actually came back to see what's new. What do you got new? Right. So that's this whole other level. And I believe he's a master marketer. And this is the other reminder, the final reflection is that, Richard was downplaying his marketing ability. He doesn't believe that he's that good at marketing. I've been in the industry for over 30 years, and I'm learning something new from him every time I see him in action. There's nobody out there that you can't learn from. And you're probably way better at something than you think you are because you're only focusing on those 1-star elements. So the question or the reflection I'm asking you, dear listener, to pay attention to is, what are those 1-star elements in your life that you're focusing on rather than focusing on where you are a 4 and a 5 and a 10 out of 5, where you're just excelling? Own it. Own the fact you're a writer. Own all those great things about who you are and what you bring to the world. And again, I learned that from my conversation with Richard. I hope you had fun with that. I hope you had fun with the reflection afterwards. If you like this podcast, one of the ways that you can help me out is you can share this with someone that you think would find great value in this awesome chat that I had with Richard. You can leave a review on the podcatcher of your choice. You can even become a patron of this podcast and support me for as little as $1 a month over at patreon.com/starkreflections. And I'll also give you access to additional goodies as I do for my awesome patrons. And a huge thank you to the patrons who support this podcast. And don't forget, if you have a reflection of your own that you would like to share for upcoming episode 300 coming at the end of, in 4 weeks, at the end of April 2023. Head over to starkreflections.ca for this episode 296. There'll be a link to a form where you can upload your own audio clip, or as several people have done, type in your reflection and I will read that as part of episode 300 because I really want there to be lots of great reflections from you, awesome listeners. And so, until next week and next episode, this is Mark Leslie Lefebvre wishing you great writing and good Stark Reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com.